I started with Tim's question about how we became so wasteful in the way that we build, and particularly in how we spend public dollars, but also to understand how is it that people, private businesses, are building in ways that seem to squander opportunity and squander wealth and squander land in many ways. And what do we need to do? We need to learn where the value in our community truly comes from. And we need to focus our improvements in these areas to cultivate deeper roots, greater prosperity, and improved economic and community resiliency. And so just in about 5 minutes here, before we wrap, I'm going to show you these numbers. I ran the numbers in Medicine Hat to compare a number of downtown commercial properties with their suburban cousins. These were the different sites that I looked at. If I'd had more time, I would have taken even more on. And I did what's called a value per acre analysis. I couldn't get the property tax data as a cold alien, so I looked up just the current assessed value of a handful of properties to see what their general capacity to be a reservoir of private investment is. That's one way to think of the value or the assessed value of any given property, is basically how much money can be stored within that property. So if your home is worth $5 million, that means you have $5 million stored there. If the market goes up or goes down, it changes. But roughly, that's a proxy for how valuable it is, but also how useful it can be to you for productive purposes. For a city, a $5 million property generates a greater tax benefit than a $1 million property. It's just as when you go to get a mortgage, that $1 million home is not going to get you as much borrowing capacity as a $5 million home. So if we have this, as we think of value as a reservoir of private investment and a reliable source of property tax revenues, I want to show you the sites that I looked at. I started with the Salvation Army building on 3rd Street. It's 0.3 acres with a fairly low assessed value for the downtown of $543,400. It's an older building. It has limited occupancy. Renting it to a nonprofit and one that isn't able to plow lots of money into improvements in the building means that its assessed value continues to be fairly low. If I standardize the assessed value to see what its value is per acre, it comes out to $1.8 million. Maybe just to quickly explain why. If we took 3 vehicles, 1 a big truck, and 2 a Mazda Miata, and 3 a smart car, and said which one can drive the furthest, the truck would win because it's got the biggest gas tank. But if we standardize this, we say which one has the best fuel mileage, that is which one gives you the best bang for buck, the truck might struggle against the Miata or the smart car. And so that's what we're doing here. Basically, this is like the miles per gallon is the values per acre, or kilometers per liter, but I've never figured that one out. I'm Canadian. I still don't use it. And that's why we're using acres. I noticed Chuck, when he was here in January, he was like, oh, hectares, and he couldn't figure out how to pronounce it. I was like, we don't use hectares ourselves, but the city has to, I think, at times. But 1.8 million, so remember that number. A couple doors over on 3rd Street is this building. She ain't very pretty, but she's functional. Currently looking for multiple tenants. You can see in the signs in the window, several of the bays are vacant, but still holding a lot of value on 2 floors with numerous businesses and retailers being incubated within these walls. And the value is $4.9 million an acre. Just by adding a second functional floor and the capacity to use the building more extensively, as well as in the improved condition of the building, makes it a far more valuable property. And now my favorite. I really should go get something there. Sugar Daddy Cheesecakes. Again, 2 stories, very simple structure. Possibly residential on the 2nd floor or some type of office space up there. They have to provide AC, so I'm assuming somebody's up there. $5.2 million an acre. And this is the downtown. So this is our baseline. This is the downtown that, as I'm told, is struggling to keep tenants. There's turnover. Businesses are turning over all the time. And yet, it is a remarkable reservoir of wealth and opportunity. A place for many to get their start and for others to finish their careers. And then across the street, still on 3rd Street, you can see the Sugar Daddy's building is just right over here with a fantastic mural. Now you have a new style of building. I said there was a change in the development pattern. This is a good example of this. It's pushed away from the street. It's pushed away and up, and it's creating some distance from the place. This could actually be just dropped into a parking lot And most of the designs like that in Lethbridge, for example, and Mayor McGrath, looks just like that, but it's just plunked into the middle of a parking lot. But this one, because it's in the downtown area, probably had to accord to some of the zoning, and so it didn't have the big parking lot attached to it, but is built in this suburban style. This new style, less effective use of land, and I'm going to tip you off to a theme. The values are going to start dropping as the built form begins to tip into the newer suburban style of development with its ample setbacks and withdrawn frontage. These are like luxury vehicles compared to what we're going to see. And yet the new things, the shiny things, we assume, no, those are the ones that hold the value. But this is $4.4 million. Now, 3 streets over on a lot that is set way off the road, but it still has a patio, which is good. We're back down to $1.8 million an acre. This is a site that is double the size of the old and tired Salvation Army, but somehow it cannot use that space any more efficiently and leaks value because of 2 things. The deep discounting that it receives for surface parking on site from the assessor, which is a massive subsidy for parking, and the degradation of the street frontage. This is no longer a great place to walk. It's not a suitable place for children to walk unaided. It's not a great place for a child to pass through on a bicycle. There's a considerable gap there that they need to navigate, and that becomes a barrier for so many. But then, a few more blocks away, the development pattern is very different. Notice the value. This is a newer building, so it should have greater value. It's on a prominent frontage. The city has invested a lot in improving the streets. There's the red pavers, there's the stamped concrete, there's an excuse for a flower bed. There's no street trees, so that's a miss, but there's an opportunity there, and yet it's only $1.6 million an acre. And it's a site that is hard to improve as it currently exists. Now, I ask the question, how does the sugar daddy feel that he's contributing 3 times as much property tax to the city while having half the amount of street frontage for the city to keep up, and providing a much better public experience out front of his establishment, being taxed significantly more while providing far more public benefit without requiring as much public infrastructure? Is this Tim's so valuable that it deserves to be taxed only 1/3 as much as sugar daddies? In my community of Delta, British Columbia, it's even more stark. We have a coffee shop with a counseling office above it that pays 7 times the amount of property tax that the local McDonald's on the most prominent street at the entrance to our town does. And I always ask, sure, we can enjoy the convenience of a drive-through and the culinary masterpiece that is the Bacon McGriddle, but is it really worth it for us to levy taxes on the coffee shop that are proportionally 7 times higher than we levy on the McDonald's if we adjust for the amount of scarce land that they're both taking up? Is that what we've collectively decided that we, the citizens, value most? At some point, if it was a 1 to 2, you get 50% of the tax revenue from the McDonald's, but it's nice to have it. But at some point, when this sliding scale goes down, do we really think that a 1/7 discount is exactly what we want to be providing to a company that takes our profits and takes them overseas? And again, I'm not waging class war or economic warfare or anything like that. I'm just asking the question, what do we value as a community? That double-double at Tim's doesn't taste quite so nice. Well, it never did. But if you know that the city is leaving remarkable amounts of money on the table by mandating design standards that result in more Tim's and make it nearly impossible to build structures like the Salvation Army building, if you must, or the more productive ones, like the small retail and office building I showed you, and sugar daddies. But Tim's and Dayz are just older, right? And that's maybe why they're getting a discounted valuation. But let's look at a new development along 2 major corridors so that the city has invested millions of dollars to construct and maintain so that this 7-acre site can be accessed by all y'all in need of pet care and ATB, a liquor store, Reuben's Veggies, and more Tim Hortons. 3 public access points run onto and off the major roads there. And this site is the most valuable one that we're looking at in my series of examples if we just look at how big the tank on this machine is. $14 million. That's great, right? Wow. Its value is $1.9 million an acre. 7.3 acres divided by 14 million is $1.9 million an acre. It's at Dayz Off Pub value. But this is in its newest state. This is what the financial masterminds in Toronto and other places say. Every community should get one of these. But it's not performing well. And this is in its finished state when it first still has the gloss and before the dollar store and the Halloween store have moved in as the other tenants have left. After significant public investment, and the vast majority of your downtown is worth more on a comparative basis, where does the public think the value in the city lies? In the downtown, most think of it as an afterthought, a place they avoid. Might we begin to see these places as gold mines instead? I've been using the phrase, where's the money pot and where's the money pit? The money pot is downtown. The money pot is in these slightly more compact neighborhoods, and the consequences are a vast increase in the capacity of those neighborhoods and those places to generate the wealth that is needed to be able to provide for basic services in the community. And can we see how then, and this is the exciting part, what do? Modest investments in downtown, like improved sidewalks, safer crosswalks with curb bump outs to improve the pedestrian experience, street lighting and public art, commitments to greater resources being provided to address those who are poorly housed or unhoused. These are all things that as you do them, they will cause the value captured and stored in the downtown to escalate significantly. It is amazing what little interventions in these high value areas are capable of, particularly because for decades these places were underinvested in. And yet they still hold way more value than this. The 7-acre site I'm looking at is newly built and already returning a value that is basically comparable to the Salvation Army building that is one of the lowest performers on 3rd Street. Now, a challenge is how do you improve the Division Street parcel, this one, to gain enough value to match the old but well-beloved Sugar Daddy's building? One of these has had national, if not international, financing backing up its construction, and it wasn't the Sugar Daddy. This is what it looks like as a question. How do we improve a $14 million property in its finished state to be as valuable or comparable to a $37.4 million one?